Hello, I'm David DeCosmo. Welcome to ECTV Live. My co-host Wes Defender is off today. We expect to see him back probably next week. My guest today is Tony Harding, and Tony is here to tell us a lot about a particular subject, but we're going to start by indicating that there's a big game coming up, a big Rail Riders game. And it's an important game, not necessarily in the standings for the Rail Riders,
right,
but because of the reason the game is being played, the sponsorship, if you will, of the game. Tell us about that. When is the game? Why is it so important?
The game is August 4th. It's a Sunday. It's 1 o'clock game, and they're playing the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, which we have a relationship with them.
That's the rivalry.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
And it's special to me because I am sponsoring the game. It is Organ Donation Awareness Day. I am a 2-time kidney recipient, and I am promoting the organ donation, why it's so necessary. And there is a big need for organ donation. I was lucky to have 2 organs donated to me, but not everybody else is. There's almost 114,000 people on the organ donation waiting list.
Wow.
And most of them are kidneys. Over 100,000 of them are on the kidney transplant waiting list. So I'm having this baseball game in my 3rd annual in order to create awareness of the need for people to become organ donors. There are 130 million registered organ donors across the country. It's a big, big number, but it's not enough because we still have 114,000 people on the waiting list. If less than 1/10% of all of those registered organ donors were live kidney donors, like my sister was to me, that list would be wiped out.
Wow.
It's amazing. I mean, we have the numbers to do it, but still, being a match for a kidney transplant is very difficult. Yeah, I know that firsthand.
Well, the game is a great way to call awareness to it because it's a fun activity for people to come out.
It is.
And yet they can, at the same time, learn a little bit about what is involved. And I know we discussed this once when you visited us once before, but I'm listed as an organ donor.
Yes.
And very frankly, the reason for me is that many years ago, my baseball hero was Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
And Mickey Mantle, his lifestyle was not a good one off the field, but he admitted to that in his final years. And he was a big supporter of organ donations because he was a recipient himself. And because of that, I said, really, that's a good cause, and I'm with it. I go along with that. So here again, there's a baseball connection.
It does filter back. It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, Mickey Mantle. Got a liver. He did have. He did abuse his liver, but he reformed and was able to get on the liver transplant list and was able to receive a liver. And that's not a very easy surgery. It's a very, very difficult surgery. And a lot of preparation goes into getting a liver. And he got very, very lucky, as did I. Now, Rod Carew.
Yes.
Rod Carew received a heart transplant about a year or 2 ago.
Ah.
And his donor was a former football player for the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, my word.
And they met, the Baltimore Raven, the donor, met Rod Carew when he was a young boy. And it's just because organ donation is around everybody. You're just not really aware of it. I know it. I live it every day. I'm an organ recipient.
Yeah,
I'm an advocate.
Your story is quite a unique story.
Yeah, it is.
Let's go back to the beginning of when you first found out that you even had a need.
Right. I was 14 years old, and I was playing football for West Scranton in my high school. And in practice, I got hit in the back. And I felt a little pain. It wasn't very much, but I went to the emergency room with my dad. We came back, there was a little blood in the urine, and I had an ultrasound, and I had polycystic kidney disease, which is a hereditary disease.
So this was not caused by the injury in football.
No.
The injury just sort of sparked the examination.
Kind of found it, yeah, if it weren't for that. So my restrictions basically back then were don't play any contact sports, to drink a lot of water, keep your kidney hydrated and flushed and everything else like that. And as I get older, my kidneys, they would give me a lot of pain because they were so big in my abdomen. They were really, really big in my abdomen. And they would push everything around inside my liver, my stomach, everything. And I was in a lot of pain, and my kidney function was dropping because the cysts were growing so big, they were squeezing the function out of the kidney. So at that point, I went to Johns Hopkins, and I looked into having a transplant. I was put on. I was eligible for a transplant, and after about 18 months of watching my kidney function decrease, it was time for a transplant. And my brother and sister were both matches. So they decided that my sister would be my donor. I'm be forever grateful to Donna. And in 2002, I had my transplant. You know, and it lasted 12 years. It was a great run, and I would take 12 years any day. You know, as anybody would.
Sure.
Because I was looking at dialysis, but I never went on dialysis.
Okay.
But when my kidney failed, I wound up going on to dialysis.
So after 12 years.
After 12 years, my kidney just faded away.
Right. Now, that was not the same disease problem then?
No.
That was a separate medical thing.
And sometimes they don't last forever, you know, and it just started to reject, and it wound up rejecting. And at that point, then, I needed to go on dialysis for the first time.
Now, we hear the term dialysis. Basically, what is dialysis?
Dialysis filters the toxins out of your blood through
Mechanically.
Okay. Right. There are two options. There's hemodialysis and there's peritoneal dialysis. I happen to have both. Peritoneal dialysis is when you have a tube put in your side. And there's a machine that fills your peritoneal cavity, which is separate from all your organs, with this solution. And it stays in your abdomen for about an hour and a half, and then it filters out. And with it comes a lot of the toxins. And then excess weight, because sometimes if you're on dialysis, you're no longer urinating. But you're drinking only 4 glasses of water a day, because that's all you can drink. So you have to drink a limited amount of water, but this pulls the excess water out. Hemodialysis is where you may have a fistula. I have a fistula in my left arm, and they put 2 needles in the left arm, and it recycles the blood 400 times an hour. And at that time, it pulls off water, and it also pulls out the toxins. And I was doing that 4 hours a day, 3 days a week. My brother was getting worked up for my second transplant, because he was a match the first time around, and it turned out that he was no longer a match.
Oh, that changed.
I didn't know that happened, but I certainly know that now. I carried my sister's kidney, and I also carried her antibodies. So her antibodies, and with mine, made my brother's kidney incompatible.
I see.
I would have rejected his kidney because of all the antibodies I had in my body. And then I wound up having a 97% incompatibility rate, okay? I would reject 97% of the kidneys that would be offered.
Oh, wow.
So I had a very slim chance of receiving a kidney. And that's when I went on to hemodialysis. And I was sitting in the in-center for 12 to 15 hours a week, you know, getting my treatment done. And I had such a small chance of getting a kidney transplant, I thought that was where I was going to spend the rest of my days.
It's kind of rough to have your life around that.
It is, and that's what people have to do.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough after only 15 months. Now, the waiting list for kidney transplants are 5 to 6 years. That's the average wait list. For our region and for regions across the country, that's basically the waiting list. I waited 15 months, and I got lucky, and someone was a match, and I got it. And I got very, very lucky, and I'm very grateful. You know, the fact that I'm celebrating that I'm getting a kidney, and also celebrating the fact that someone had passed away.
Yeah.
You know, and that was nearly 4 years ago to the day that this happened. And I got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, you know, we have a kidney offer for you. And I was able to get my second kidney, you know. And within 24 hours from the first call, I was in recovery with my kidney.
Oh, my word.
And I felt better again, you know. Kidney disease, you don't see it, but people feel it.
Yeah.
It's very draining, and it makes you very tired, because it's not doing everything that your kidney does. And even on dialysis, if you're in center, you're on dialysis for 12 hours a week. That's doing what your kidney does 24/7.
Right.
So that's how harsh the treatment is. So when you're done with dialysis, you know, most people aren't getting up and doing
Yeah,
things.
I recall, though, when we had you in a year ago, that you told me that while on dialysis, you were actually able to plan trips.
I did.
Now,
I did.
How on earth did you do that?
It was drive more than anything. You know, I was 49. I didn't have much going for me at this point, you know, and I looked around in my center and I saw all these people. You know, I was in a center with 12 chairs, so I was one of 12 people on dialysis looking around, and their heads were down, and, you know, they were lifeless. You know, they didn't have much going for them. And I wanted to prove to myself first and to them that you can live your life. And I planned a 4-day bucket list road trip that I did myself. I got in my car after I dropped my daughter off at school. I got in my car and I drove to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. I bopped around there for a couple hours and it was great. Saw all the Steelers. No one else really counts, especially the Patriots. They don't count at all. And I got in my car and then I went up to Akron and I had a dialysis treatment because it was Wednesday and that was my treatment day. So I had a 4-hour treatment in Akron. I spent the night in a hotel. The next day, I drove to Michigan. And I saw Bob Seger close out his tour in his hometown. And he's doing his final tour this year, but it was the final tour in his hometown. It was an incredible ride. And as I was driving up, I was listening to him the whole way up, and he has a song, and it just resonated with me. You know, it was incredible. He was a traveling man, and I remember that my nurses meant so much to me, you know, and all that they did for me. When I was transplanted, when I was on dialysis, they were wonderful people. And he sang a lyric called "Sometimes at Night I See Their Faces. I see the traces they've left on my soul. Those are the memories that make me a wealthy man." And I was driving up there as a wealthy man. I had my health. As much as I didn't have my health, I had my health.
Well, yeah.
And I was driving up there and I was listening to him sing that song to me and 50,000 other people. But it was a connection that I had. It was the greatest concert I ever saw.
I think that part of your story is, in one sense, perhaps the most impressive, because it shows that even those that are locked into the need for this treatment, with a little bit of planning.
Right. And the dialysis units encourage it. They want you to do what I did.
And with the internet today,
it's easy.
You can find probably treatment almost anywhere.
Yeah, and I went to a DaVita, and they're a dialysis treatment center, and I said I need a place in Akron on Wednesday and Pittsburgh on that Saturday morning, and they said, and within a couple of days they said, okay, go here and go here, and that's what made my trip possible. So when I left Michigan, I drove to Cleveland to see the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because I had to see that. And then the House from A Christmas Story, you know, Ralphie.
I've been there.
Yeah. So I was there. That's right, you were. So I was there, and I took the tour of that. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And then that evening, I drove to Pittsburgh, and my dad grew up in Pittsburgh, so I visited the house that he was born and raised in, and I saw that.
That's a wonderful trip.
Yeah, it was. It was. I spent that night in Pittsburgh near my dad's old house, and the next morning I had a dialysis treatment Saturday morning. Then I went to, which was the Console Center then, to see a hockey game, and I don't know anything about hockey except like goal and fight, but you know, I was going because I was there and they were in town.
Yeah.
And then I drove home, and I did it all in 4 days, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
And I did it, and I went back to my unit and I said, I did this. You can do this too. You know, I try to inspire. And a month later, I'm sitting in the dialysis chair, and it's Friday morning, and a nurse walks by and says, the Kentucky Derby's tomorrow. So I went.
Oh no.
Whenever I did my planning for my trips, I only did it from the dialysis chair. I didn't do it at home or anything. I only did it in the dialysis chair to make it that a positive experience. Okay, I made it, and it was productive for me. I planned my trips. So by the time I got off the chair that day, I had tickets to a baseball game in Cleveland and a hotel in Wheeling, West Virginia the next night. So I drove to Cleveland, saw a baseball game. Drove to Kentucky, saw the Derby, American Pharoah, which was the Triple Crown winner that year.
Yes.
I saw American Pharoah win the first leg of it. I collected my money. I drove to Wheeling, West Virginia. I spent the night in Wheeling, West Virginia. I came home the next day. I did 1,500 miles in 2 days.
Amazing.
But it was fun. You know, this is what I want to do.
I can tell the memory is still.
Yeah, it is. It
bubbles through.
It was a blast. And so now I tell that story at the baseball game when I have the people over. Like people come up to me and like last year at the baseball game, a guy came up to me and said he was at the Lehigh Valley and he was just diagnosed with kidney disease and he may need a transplant. And he saw me and he wanted to come up and thank me for what I'm doing, because who knows, I may reach the person that checks yes on the box to become an organ donor that gives him his kidney.
Right.
You know,
right.
You never know. You never know what can happen. There's 114,000 people waiting on the transplant list.
Now, why, in your mind, why are people reluctant to check that box, or why are they reluctant?
There's a lot of misconceptions. You know, the big one that we hear as we do the health fairs with the Gift of Life, which is our donor program, they say that the doctors won't save my life if they know I'm an organ donor. And that's not true. I mean, the doctors and nurses, they're there to save your life. That's what they do. You know, they're not looking at your wallet to see if you're an organ donor. And you know, not everybody can become an organ donor. So even if you're registered to become an organ donor, you may not be able to.
Is that right?
Well, they have to die under certain circumstances. You have to be brain dead in order to donate their organs, or they would have to die under a cardiac death, which means their heart will slow down in the operating room, and when it finally stops beating, then the organs are recovered. You know, so but you know, dead at the scene, a car accident, God forbid, you know, they're not donors. So like about 1% of all registered organ donors actually become organ donors.
Oh, I see.
So there's, you know, even though there's a need for organ donors, a lot of those people won't be able to.
And of course,
But there's also
one doesn't have to die to be a donor.
Oh, that's
because
true. That's
in the
true.
case of the kidney, for instance.
Kidney, and also a lobe of your liver can be donated.
Okay.
And then there's tissue donation. A friend of mine, she's had degenerative back disease, and she has pieces of bone in her neck and her back. And these are cadaver donors. They were also organ donors, but there's also, you know, the donors also donate tissue and bone and skin to help burn people heal, you know? And it's very far-reaching. One organ donor can save up to 8 lives, but enhance up to 75 more.
Wow.
You know, there's a lot that goes on with organ donation.
And I suspect technology is also moving ahead so rapidly with regard to that.
It is.
That there'll be some changes in the future, whether I see them or not.
Yeah.
That will be coming up. I know there are people that even donating things, you know, from infancy, so to speak, that are later used in their own life.
Right.
To help
yeah.
them.
I mean, there's stem cell research that, you know, there's talk of electronic kidneys. You know, people see that online, like the bionic kidney, it's called. And then, of course, the people are working on it. But you see this come across your news feed on your phone, and people get excited. Oh, I'm going to wait for one of those. Well, they're so far out.
Yeah.
You know, they're not tomorrow's news. You know, you've
It's the day after tomorrow.
right, and beyond. And it's, you know, I don't want people to wait for that. You know, you'd be surprised. I visited 75 to 80 dialysis units across the state in the last year and a half, just to talk to people about organ donation, getting a transplant, what it's like. I know what it's like to wake up from a kidney transplant. I know I can say that you feel better. People on dialysis, it's a slow decline. Your kidneys function declines slowly in most cases. So people really don't know how sick they are. They know they're sick, they know their kidneys aren't working, they know they're on dialysis. And they know it's hard to recover from dialysis. But they just don't know how sick they are because it was a slow decline. You can't really remember how good you felt. But when you get transplanted, in some cases, like mine, instantly, I felt better. Even when I was doing all that stuff on dialysis, going on all those trips and feeling good about myself and doing this stuff, I thought my benefit, if I ever got a transplant, was my time. I just didn't have to go there anymore.
Yes,
You know, I felt good enough. I felt good. I didn't have to go to dialysis anymore. That was my win. I was happy with that until I felt better. I didn't expect the jump. First time I was going around, my first transplant, I was very sick for a long time. And when I had my first kidneys, they were removed in my first transplant. Usually they don't remove the kidneys, but mine were so big they had to remove them in order to fit my other kidney in. So when I got my first transplant, I felt better, and I felt better instantly, and I expected to. Second time around, like I was saying, I was feeling good. I was doing my thing. I was getting in my car and going. I didn't expect to feel better, but I did feel better. I didn't know how sick I was until I felt better, and that was a drastic change. And then I started going to dialysis units across the state and talking to people and educating them.
And that's important because when you have somebody like a Rod Carew you mentioned, the fact of the matter is that when they tell their story, more people listen. They're a celebrity, they're a known commodity, as it were, and I think maybe they get people thinking a little bit more.
Yeah.
When you have something like the baseball game, and this is your third, is it?
The third
that
annual,
you're doing
yes.
now? Do you circulate donor cards there?
We do. We have the group of the coalition that is our group in the Northeast Pennsylvania for the Gift of Life. The Gift of Life is our donor program, okay? And they'll be there. We'll be passing out these green bands, and we'll have pens and things like that. And we can actually register people to become organ donors on the spot. We will be there. A lot of us will have our Gift of Life ambassador shirts on. We are ambassadors. We are ambassadors of goodwill on behalf of organ donation, and that's what the volunteers with the Gift of Life are.
Yeah, a quick reminder that we're talking about the need for organ donors, and specifically this event is the Rail Riders baseball game against the rival Iron Pigs on August the 4th.
Right, Sunday.
That's an afternoon game.
Sunday afternoon, yeah.
Sunday afternoon game. So great time to take the family out to the ballpark and perhaps meet someone like Tony and learn a little bit more about this, because I guess one of the other things that might stand in the way of getting people to donate or to pledge to donate, it just fear, just
Yeah.
unknown.
Yeah, some people say like it kind of puts me on a list that like it's like another step towards the end, you know, where obviously it's not. But you know, think about, I mean, it's part of your legacy to become an organ donor. I've seen stories where a man had bicycled halfway across the country, and on Father's Day he put a stethoscope in his ears and listened to the beating heart of his daughter in some man's chest. These are real stories. This really happens, you know. That young man would have passed away had he not received a heart, you know. And there are people out there that do what I do as far as advocating for donation, trying to get the word out because it is so necessary, you know. There are a lot of states like Colorado. They have an 80% registration list, where Pennsylvania is in the low 50s.
80%?
80%. They're very progressive. Now, they also have what's called an opt-out. So when you get your license, or when you turn 18, you're an organ donor, unless you opt out of it, okay? When you go to the DMV, like I do, you know, and they say, would you like to become an organ donor? You say yes, and they check the box, and it comes out on your license that you are an organ donor. In Colorado, you are an organ donor, okay, unless you take your steps in order to not become an organ donor. Mm-hmm. So Pennsylvania,
it's automatic.
Yeah,
in that case. Yeah. Here, when you get your driver's license, that option is offered, and then there's a little check box on the license that shows that you are a donor. And the obvious reason for that is that where you know, again, God forbid, to be in a fatal accident, they don't want to have to wait for 2 or 3 days to get go through permission of next
Right.
of kin and that sort of thing. You have to kind of express your wishes, and I guess maybe that's another important thing to cover.
Yeah.
That if you're going to take that step, if you're going to be a donor, you really ought to make sure that your family knows
Absolutely.
what your intentions are.
Right, and tell your family, if you are an organ donor, tell your family that that's what you want to do. You want to become an organ donor. You want to save the lives of others. You know, I wear my green band because it's very close to me, but I also tell people why I wear it. You know, it's one thing about wearing the band, but it's another thing about telling people why. You know, and tell your family the reasons why you want to become an organ donor. Because I know someone who benefited from organ donation. Because I heard, you know, it can save up to 8 lives. The Cody Berets Foundation. It's a wonderful foundation. They do a lot of great work. When Cody became an organ donor, he saved, I believe it was 5 lives. You know, 1 organ donor. And there are 5 people that are alive because of that. Mm-hmm. You know, and like there are so many people on the waiting list that there are people in the hospital waiting for hearts and lungs. You know, that's their lives. They're living in a hospital waiting for an organ
mentioned
donation.
that technological advancements, has that made it a little bit easier for those who are waiting to find someone?
Social media is incredible. It really is. I mean, people put out social media posts and they have their own page. You know, that my daddy is looking for a kidney, or my wife is an A positive, and we need a kidney to save her life. And you see it all over. I'm in tune to that. That's the stuff that I see. But all that stuff wouldn't be possible without the donors. And you can register, other than the DMV, David. You can also register at donors1.org. with the donors, the number 1.org. And you can sign up to become an organ donor. You don't have to wait until you get your license renewed.
Oh, okay.
You'd be in a national database once you do that, that you are an organ donor. So you don't have to wait every 4 years to become an organ donor. So
Right.
there with like the technology, the social media is incredible. I see a lot of stories of people finding kidneys, and out of nowhere, someone steps up. My first baseball game, I was taking dialysis with a young girl, and a friend of hers that she worked with just said, "I want to be an organ donor. I want to see if I'm a match," and he was. And actually, he threw out the first pitch, and she caught it at my first baseball game. Because it's symbolism.
Yeah,
Like he
yeah.
donated life to her.
Have you been getting some response at those games in terms
Absolutely.
Good.
There's a lot of us around. We all wear the bands. We all have shirts that we wear. And that are knowledgeable, like I am. I'm not on an island. There's a lot of people
Sure.
that do this. And we'll be there in force talking to people about what they want to know about organ donation.
Well, your story is so impressive, and in a sense, during your hardest time, you made such positive moves that I'm still stunned by them.
It's lemonade, David. I mean, you got to make lemonade.
Well, you made a picture full of it. That's for
I
sure.
certainly did. I'm
You
still
got about a
drinking it,
minute
too.
left. Look at the camera. There's people watching. What do you want to tell them about the game?
I want you to come out to the game. It's Organ Donation Awareness Day with the Rail Riders. It's August 5th. You can reach me at Facebook. My name is Tony Harding, or look up Organ Donation Awareness Tour on Facebook, and you'll get the information there. We'll get arrangements to get some
And
tickets.
I think I may have said August 4th. It's the 5th.
It is I'm sorry, it's August the 4th. It's
4th, August
Sunday
4th.
the 4th, my apologies.
I want to make sure that's August 4th at the stadium. And watch the Rail Riders and the Iron Pigs, and you'll learn a little about organ donation. And maybe you become a donor too. That'd be
Maybe.
great.
That would.
Tony, thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
joining.
David. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Mark McGlory, thank you so much for your work behind the camera. I'm David DeCosmo for ECTV Live. Till we see you again next week. Here's hoping all your news is good.